They actually have this like fear that if we start collecting reviews, we're going to get a bunch of bad reviews and it's going to tank our conversions and sales.
It's also the place where you're sending like 90% of your ads. So I always feel like the product page is the most important page on an e-commerce site. Probably 95% of the time I take on a client, they don't have perfect product pages for SEO. Hey, welcome to Off the Record, where we talk about Shopify growth. Today, I'm here with my co-host, Leighton, and we're going to be talking about product pages, best practices, CRO, SEO, GEO, and how to just make more money with your product pages.
Yeah, thanks, Patrick. So, the product page is one of the most critical parts of an e-commerce site. Obviously, that's where the customer's making the decision whether or not to add to cart. And then if you have any options like variants, size, color, and other variants, they're deciding which one to get and the quantity, they're adding to cart, and then ideally proceeding from there straight to checkout. So it's like the bottleneck that everything is leading up to somebody making a purchase decision, which is kind of what the e-commerce store is ultimately for.
Yeah, and it's also the place where you're sending like 90% of your ads. So in terms of advertising, typically a website on Google Ads or Facebook is going to be sending a ton of traffic directly to the product page. So I always feel like the product page is the most important page on an e-commerce site. A lot of people are going to be opening up Instagram or Google Ads, and they're going to go to the product page. And if it's what they want, they might never even go to the homepage, collection page, or any other page types. So when it comes to CRO and just making sure that these pages work well, it really can't be overstated.
Yeah, and that's a good point that somebody may not ever click away from the product page. And if they do, they might actually be just leaving your site. So I think one of the critical things the product page has to do is very quickly establish trust, that this is a trustworthy site that the customer can give their credit card to, that they know what to expect is like when they're going to get their order, how fast is it going to ship, is there a shipping cost that's going to like spring up at the last moment, or is it a reasonable shipping cost? So all these like questions and doubts that a customer might have in their mind, PDP or product detail page really has to do a good job of communicating about those sorts of things.
Yeah, most definitely. And I'm so curious to hear your experience, Leighton, because you've been doing Shopify development for a long time. I'm sure you've had your hands in some product pages quite a few times. So curious to see what you're seeing. And then I'll share what I'm seeing on the SEO side of things, how we've grown traffic to product pages, how we've thought about how Google interprets all of that.
Yeah, awesome. Well, the first point that I wanted to talk about is that your product imagery is extremely important. And across the entire site, whenever we're designing a site, an e-commerce store for our clients, that's what I tell people is that the quality of your images really dictates the overall perceived quality of the site that a customer, sees as they're browsing your site. If it's really poor, blurry images or poorly lit or they don't look professional, that's instantly recognizable as soon as someone lands on the site, including on the product page. And that's just going to very quickly lower like the status, the trust, the credibility of your store. So professional images. Another issue I often see with the clients we work with is that they may only have like one or two images on the product page. So it might just be kind of a regular kind of generic shot from a distance of the products, whether that's a piece of clothing or a tool or an electronic device or whatever. And people like to look at these images, they like to like just kind of swipe through on their phone, like if they're on a mobile device, or click and zoom in, maybe on a desktop device or laptop. And they like to see it from all different angles. And they like to be able to zoom way in and see the detail, the texture. If it's kind of a technical product, you might have seen these images where it kind of zooms in on a specific piece or a component of the product and kind of highlights it and says like, here's where this happens or here's this feature. So the images are just it's like prime real estate for building trust and also like building desire. The customer, like they have this need, they're trying to solve it, and like the images can go a long way in like helping cross that threshold of being willing to buy. So
most definitely. Yeah, I feel like people do undervalue that sometimes. Just from a user experience standpoint, it's so incredibly important. Think about if it's a normal store. People are going to want to look at the product. They're going to want to look at it at different angles. And a lot of this stuff ends up becoming integrated into the algorithms because they know people like it. So in Google Merchant Center, if you're running shopping ads on Google Ads, they also evaluate you by how many images you have. So if you aren't like a excellent store, then sometimes you can just need to add more images and it will give you a little bit of a boost algorithmically for both the free shopping ads and the paid shopping ads. So, all this stuff matters. And I think people have done some creative stuff with it. I've seen people have, if it's very visual niche, you can have very large images that are larger on the product page, where it's really just incentivizing them looking at it. Sometimes you have it where you can scroll down and there's like image, image, image. Sometimes it's where like you mentioned, there might be like some even visual effects on the images, pushing you to click on it and engage and zoom in. So there's a lot of power that can be done depending on the industry with images.
Yeah. And another thing I think is good to include, if you can, is some sort of in-scale / lifestyle image. So as an example, you might show a person like right next to the product using it, or it just happens to be in the same shot, if like in the context, to show both like how big is it, what does it look like in real life, versus on a plain white background. It's a little bit more abstract and hard to tell like what is this like in real life. And depending on what you're selling, that can be more or less important. If it's like a piece of furniture or artwork or clothing, then it's really important like how does it relate to human scale, and what does it look like on a person. There are some cool like augmented reality things now you can do that were kind of like all the rage a few years ago, and I think I haven't heard as much about it lately, but it's not too hard now to build this into your Shopify store, where you can say like on, let's say, a piece of furniture, you can say like view this in my home, and you click a button and it switches to your phone's camera, and then you hold it up and it shows that product like in your living room. So we've helped clients with that before. It's definitely doable and can be appropriate depending on your product.
Yeah, exactly. And I'm going to just share my screen real quick here on an example I like, and I'll describe it for anybody on the podcast, only audio. Here's where you have like a large product image, very quick zoom. You have the different colors here that are variants. And then when you scroll down, you have different sizes of images. Very extensive on the image side. You can even click to show more images, and then you have some details and reviews and everything. So I love this example because it's very simple, clean, in a kind of weird niche. So it's like fancy pens. But when you are buying, like if you think of a Mont Blanc, like a $3,000 pen, you probably want to get as close to feeling like you're holding the pen yourself as possible. And so I like how they did that, where it scrolls down, there's different sizing and different, incentives to view the image more than anything on the product page there.
Yeah. And one thing I saw in the example you just shared was there's also UGC, or user generated content, where you can encourage your customers to actually take photos of the product that they order from you and then upload it to a review, or upload it in some other way that you can share. And that can go in the image gallery, or it can be like in a separate review section down below. But that's definitely a pretty powerful thing you can do on your product pages too.
Yeah, like here is where people are actually showing them holding the pen themselves. So that's another great example. Like you want it to be, especially in certain niches, as visceral, like you're holding the product as possible. And the product page should serve that purpose, to give as much information as needed, as if they were in person and you could just, flood them with information.
Yep. Yeah, we're trying to recreate the like in-store physical hands-on experience as much as we can on a screen.
Exactly. You mentioned the social proof and reviews. So that's hugely important. And this example is great, where you have user generated content, but you also just have the reviews there. So after the images, I think having reviews with actual user-generated content, people talking about the product, is just a huge selling point. So that's social proof. From an SEO perspective in Google Ads, you can get those reviews to pull into your Google SERPs and your Google Shopping listings, and they always have a high CTR effect when you do that. A lot of people don't have their technical setup, so the reviews aren't actually pulling in to Google, and it's always a very quick win. But I'm curious, Leighton, how have you done reviews? Have you seen different setups, different apps? I mean, I know there's all these different Shopify apps like Okendo and things like that people use.
Yeah, there are a handful of apps, and they're fairly similar for the most part. Probably the most common one that our clients use is Judge Me, or Judge.me. It's very affordable. I think it's like $15 a month for the paid version, and they also have a free version, which is more limited. Stamped.io is another one. Okendo, Looks, there's a bunch. So I would say just, look at them and compare the pricing and features and see what looks best to you. But one thing I'd like to just point out is, or mention, is that a lot of times when we talk to our clients and we'll often start a new like relationship with a client with like auditing their site and making a list of improvements they could make. And a common one that we see is that they either don't use a reviews app at all, they're not collecting reviews, or they're just not like focused on it, prioritizing it, really doing a good job of collecting reviews. And something that's kind of surprisingly common that I hear is a lot of our clients, when we recommend that they start collecting reviews and showing them on the site, they actually have this like fear that if we start collecting reviews, we're going to get a bunch of bad reviews and it's going to tank our conversions and sales. And that's like very understandable. But I think it's something that I would definitely recommend not letting it hold you back, that fear, because for the most part, the reviews are going to be good if you have a good product, or unless you have really terrible customer service and you're always losing orders and, ship times are a mess and all that, like that's going to be a problem. But if it's a good product and you're handling it well, then you're going to get good reviews for the most part. And the other thing is the small percentage of negative reviews that you get, that's actually a really good opportunity. Sites that respond publicly to negative reviews in a way that's not just like an AI response or like a template response, but where you can tell that someone's actually like responding and caring about the issue the customer has, like that actually builds more trust, because nobody's going to get 100% 5-star reviews. Every store, if they're honest, is going to have a few 1-star, 2-star, 3-star reviews. But then it's like, how do you handle those to demonstrate that you're a trustworthy company that's going to take care of your customers, whether it's giving them a refund or shipping a replacement or whatever. And that's just an opportunity to like demonstrate your amazing customer service. So it's actually not a bad thing to have some lower star reviews.
Yeah. And I think a lot of that can be solved on the operations side too. I think people typically, I almost never do a negative review on a product. The only reason I would is if I tried to get a refund and I felt like it was unfair, or like the product was broken and they didn't refund me, right? So like, if there are any issues like that, it may be more on the customer service / operational side. As long as you're not, I doubt, I don't know many people that are like sending really bad reviews just because, they thought the color was bad, or I don't know, right? Like for like some small reason, you certainly get it. But like, I think people also take that into account. So yeah, I think that that worry is something that I want to over-index, overthink on. And not to mention, I feel like a lot of these tools, you can remove a review, because it is your own website. So if you do feel like the review is really not trustworthy and it's maybe you solved the issue with them, so you gave them the refund, etc. I think you can manage it.
Yeah. Yeah, I think all those tools, unless it's like a totally external tool like Trustpilot, all of the Shopify apps for reviews do let you moderate reviews. So if you feel like there's one that's just completely unfair or spam or whatever, then you can remove it. And probably some stores do remove all bad reviews, which is not really, it's not the honest approach.
Right thing to do.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And like I said, like,
that doesn't feel right.
yeah, and if I ever am like shopping and I see a store that only has 5-star reviews, like that's actually a red flag. Like, okay, are these real? Are they actually just like getting rid of the bad reviews? So yeah, like it's just a
Me
trust
too.
building opportunity. And then as far as like the user interface on the product page, I would say make sure that the reviews are highly visible. So obviously you should have like a little star average widget that goes up near the product title and the price that someone will see instantly, and like the number of reviews. So you could say like rated 4.8 out of 5 with 99 reviews or whatever. And then lower on the product page, you're typically going to have the full reviews widget with all of the actual reviews and a form where somebody can write a review. But you want to make sure that reviews form is not hidden inside of a tab. So you shouldn't have to like click into a reviews tab to see those reviews. Ideally, they should be visible just as you scroll down the page naturally, because a lot of people aren't going to click on that tab. So making them more visible is just going to be more effective.
Yeah, most definitely. Yeah, I think the more you can highlight real reviews that sound natural and that are real, especially if they have content on them, if they've taken a photo of the pin, all that's really great. I know one of my clients implemented a system where you get rewards for various
Yep.
stuff. And so like if you add a review, you'll get reward points that you can like buy different little products and stuff. So you can try to incentivize the engagement there, especially if you're in a repeat purchase model where like someone maybe is like a continuous customer of yours. They bought multiple products from you, just to incentivize them to actually leave reviews when they're after they've used them and stuff. It's going to be very dependent on the industry, of course, but that specifically worked well in a collector's market because these people are buying, like 20 products and they're really enjoying them, and incentivizing them to share that enjoyment with people on a review is something they could use to push their brand and marketing.
Yeah, nice. Next, I want to talk about something that is really important, and that is how can we maximize the revenue that you're getting from a product page apart from just selling the product itself. So we've been talking about how to build trust and encourage someone to buy the product page, the product that is the page they're on. But beyond that decision of just adding to cart and going to checkout, like how else can we maximize the value of that order, that purchase? And the main ways that I'm going to talk about are things like cross sells, bundles, and upsells. So how can we get someone to make a decision to increase the size of their order as they're shopping on your site? And one like really common example is to include some sort of complementary add-on item on the product page. So as someone is deciding whether or not to add to cart, you can suggest that they add this other item. So as an example, we have a client who sells fountains and like statues and stuff that somebody might put in their yard. And if someone's buying one of these, there might be like a cover that you might want to put on it, or like if it's a fountain, maybe you need to buy this like optional remote control, turn it on and off from inside your house or something. And these little accessories or complementary items that you can suggest on the product page. You can do it elsewhere on the site as well, like in the cart or even in checkout or post purchase, but including some of those on the product page is often a good idea. Of course, the trade-off or the thing we want to be careful of is that we don't give the customers so many choices and so much overwhelming content to look at that they kind of get overwhelmed and just like click away because like I can't make all these decisions right now. So we don't want to give them analysis paralysis. So you keep it fairly simple, give them a couple options of things they can add on, and then leave it at that. And then another form of an upsell is actually upselling from a one-time purchase to a subscription. So if you have a consumable product, like a food item or health and beauty item, supplement, makeup, whatever, that's the kind of thing that someone's going to use up within probably a few weeks or a couple months, and then they're going to ideally come back and purchase again. So if we can encourage them to upgrade to a subscription, then that's going to really extend the lifetime value of that customer. And you're not going to be paying for ads anymore to get that customer. They're already your customer. You own that relationship, and then you can encourage them through a subscription is actually like an automated way to make that purchase occur. But then you can also use email marketing and SMS marketing after the fact to get them to come back and buy again. And that's kind of a different topic. But yeah, just kind of giving the customer more opportunities on the product page to add a little bit more to their cart or make it a recurring subscription order. Those can be really, really good opportunities here.
Yeah, and I've seen that work really well several times. I was buying something for my hair. It was like curly like shampoo and conditioner or something. And they got me. They did the like 20-30% off for the subscription. And I'm like, and then the second package comes in and I'm like, oh wait, I didn't even like this.
Yeah.
But it definitely works well. I think I've seen Carpe, which is a deodorant company, also do that. I've seen a couple companies do really good subscription upsells. Usually it's from the discount. So like if you have a big, very visual discount that would actually make someone incentivized to be like, hey, I mean, if I don't like it, I can just cancel it. And then realistically, it's so hard to remember to cancel stuff. Unless you put your calendar event right then and there, you're probably not going to cancel it. So that's a great way. Definitely something that could increase AOV and just like general like increasing repeat purchases and the value of each customer. On what you mentioned on cross sells and upsells, it's perfect. A lot of times when I think about this stuff, I go back to Amazon because I probably can't imagine how much money they've put into all of this stuff on e-commerce. And you mentioned of essentially a frequently bought together module, which is what I usually think about. Which Amazon usually has this right under their main images. They have frequently bought together, and this will, for them, it's programmatically done where, if you're looking at a fountain here, it's going to automatically recommend a fountain cover and like some kind of spray that you put on it so that algae doesn't grow or something like that, right? So there's frequently bought together, and then deals on related products, so like a general related products modules, and then customers who viewed this also viewed, and then additional details and images. And so, yeah, those modules work really well. I find with like large retailers, you usually see, so people with a lot of products, you'll see multiple of those like additional product recommendations. So they might have like 3 of them. They might have frequently bought together related products, and then they'll just like have a third one that's like just related products, but again, and it's slightly different. So it seems like that works well. Just give a lot of options. But then if you're more like D2C with a couple products or like fewer product catalog, usually just having a couple, like that pin example just has one you may also consider section. So I think it kind of depends on the niche, right? So like if you're in this example, they don't overwhelm you with too many options. You just have the you may also consider, and then like a from the blog kind of thing for informational content. So have a couple options there, but definitely these upsells are huge for e-commerce and Shopify. Not only that, but they also help Google for SEO too, because they'll create internal links across the site. So just allow Google to crawl all the product pages quickly. So as long as Google can crawl those, sometimes you'll see them as no follow links. Sometimes you'll see them as like only rendered with JavaScript, and Google might have a hard time following them. So those are some tactical issues you'd want to investigate for SEO. But these are really great ways to think about internal linking and just connecting everything together for Google.
Yeah. Some themes in Shopify now do have some sort of cross-sell functionality built in, like right near the add to cart form. I think all themes have a more traditional row of related products that you can show towards the bottom. But if you want more like the Amazon style, frequently bought together widget, there's an app that a lot of our clients have used. And I think it's just called frequently bought together. So if you search for that in the Shopify App Store, you'll find it. And it's super easy to set up, and it allows customers to either add individual items to their cart, or in the Amazon style, you have like a add all three for this price, and it might give them a little discount if they buy all three items or whatever. So that can be a nice, super easy way to just add that kind of functionality to your store. And then
That's really cool.
one other example I just wanted to share real quick is actually one of our clients. And another way to increase your AOV is with bundling. And the way this works is on a product page, you've got your regular add to cart form, but then you have this little secondary call to action here, build a set and save. So normally it's $9.99, but if you click this, it's going to take you to the bundle builder, and then it adds that item that you were just on, adds that to your cart or to the bundle, but then you can add more items, fill the bundle, and then when you reach a certain threshold, then you get a discount, or you can add 3 more spices and save even more. So kind of an incentive to, like, the more you add, the more you save, and it's just kind of a nice way to just take that what could have been just one item being purchased and increase that to 3 or 6 or 9 or 12.
Yeah, that's really cool for increasing AOV. Yeah, that's perfect. I love that implementation. Yeah, there's a lot of creative things you can do depending on the industry. And that would work for industries where you have people buying multiple things, so candles, all kinds of things like that. Where it would make sense, like, hey, I might want 3 candles around my house. But if there's just a product page and it doesn't recommend me buying anymore, then I might just buy one. But I would be like somewhat susceptible, especially if there's a discount, to buying multiple. Especially if, a candle burns out, if you use candles a lot, it's going to burn out. It's consumable. So yeah, lots of good options there. So thanks for sharing.
Yeah, you can also, just one more thought to add, you can also pair that with a free shipping threshold to really incentivize the larger purchase. You can say, it's $5 or $8 flat rate shipping, but if you buy $50 or more, then it's free shipping. And so then you're like trying to build up enough of a cart to get to reach that free shipping amount. And you can communicate that on the product page right near the add to cart button. You can highlight that and say, like, just so you know, if you have this size order, then you'll get free shipping as a way to boost your AOV.
Yep, definitely. And a little bit of a side discussion here, but something I would want to bring in too is just pricing in general. So with Google Ads, which we have a lot of experience with, pricing is a big deal, because typically on Google, you have people price shopping. Because if you search something, maybe it's candles, like Google is going to show you a bunch of products. So if your candles are worth $50, you're going to be competing with a bunch of candles that are like, whatever it is, $10. And so you're going to have different prices, and that sort of price competitive aspect of Google Ads is important to consider when you're looking at your products, whether that's adding in discounts, having a sale there, or just considering like what keywords are you going after? How are you considering doing your marketing? Because certain niches, we have someone with handmade items that he's competing with people from mass manufactured Chinese retailers, and he's manually he has a team in a warehouse like crafting these pieces. So you're never going to really compete on price. So then you have to get a little bit more creative on how you're targeting everyone. But I do think that's an element of CRO too that's a little bit more fundamental to the business. Like, you probably already know your pricing, but you should consider in your marketing, if you are higher priced than everyone else, you need to demonstrate that value. Like, why are you higher priced? Like, if you're handmade and everyone else isn't, maybe like on your product page, like show a video of like how you manufacture your products. Like, why are you better? Because they may be price shopping and they're saying, hey, you're, $50 and this other guy's $30. So they should be ideally on the product page, know why that's the case as much as possible. You can demonstrate that through your images, through what you're doing on your product page with content. But that's another thing I want to mention, because I've seen that a lot. There's a great report on Google Merchant Center that will show exactly your pricing compared to everyone else. So you're adding into Google Merchant Center your SKU number or your GTIN, and it will connect that to everyone else selling the same product and see what the prices are. So if they do have other people selling the same or similar products, they'll kind of give you a benchmark pricing there so that you can compare it.
Yeah, nice. And Patrick, as you're talking about potentially competing in Google Merchant Center with other sellers who are selling the exact same item, and that leads into our next point, which is about the importance of having unique product content. And so this is especially important. Let's say you have a vendor, a supplier, and you are either buying wholesale from them or you're drop shipping, and there might be 100 other e-commerce stores that are selling the exact same thing from that supplier, and you're all showing up in Google Ads. And then there's also SEO as a component. You're all trying to rank for the same keywords effectively. So it's really important then to think about, how can we make your product pages unique? So we were talking about pricing, but we also can talk about the other content on the product pages. And I'll defer to you as the SEO expert and Google Ads expert here.
Yeah. So that's a huge part. Very often we see people just copying and pasting manufacturer's descriptions. They may have used some kind of tool to pour over products. Product management is pretty big deal, especially when you're working with 20,000, 30,000, or we've worked with people with 1 million products, right? So you have a lot of data there. So a lot of times people they don't really consider the SEO implementation, and they're kind of just, hey, we need products, we need people to buy them. So they might just upload a CSV filled with supplier descriptions or with no description at all. So you have a lot of different cases when it comes to retailers that are selling products. The key idea here is, if Google has 10 pages and they all say the same exact thing, and then you're especially newer than all the other pages, it's very unlikely they'll even, because they already have 10 different people. They probably have already chosen the one that they think is the canonical or like the most important real page with that content. So then they're going to rank that page. And if you come in with the same exact content, they're going to just consider it as like you pretty much duplicated the content from that main page that they found. So if you do that at scale and you have 7,000 products that are all like that, your performance on Google is going to be diminished considerably from an SEO perspective. Google Ads is a little bit easier because you're paying Google. So like, it'll accept that and you can still have some performance. But on SEO, it's very difficult if you're using duplicate content. And so, yeah, unique product content that ranks is extremely important. And you can increase CTR, and you can also increase conversion rate as well on the page. So in that way, I think it's very important to, even if you just, grab the supplier description, rewrite it with AI, and then humanize it a little bit, you're going to be going a long way. I mean, I think it's even better to bulk edit with AI rather than take supplier descriptions. I would still recommend running everything through a human so that you can edit, qualify, humanize. But yeah, in general, if you really do have like 1 million products, you may just like run it all through AI. But using supplier descriptions and stuff like that is a major problem for large product catalogs.
Yeah. So just to clarify for listeners, are we mainly talking right now about just the description? There's that one text field in Shopify for the product description. There's a lot of other fields as well that we could talk about, the title tag, meta description, which are more SEO focused. And then I guess there's other kinds of content like FAQs. So I guess how would you think about how to approach those different components?
Yeah. And you can get away with even duplicate product descriptions if they're short, and then you add content onto it. So then the page is not, primarily duplicate, it's primarily original content. So yeah, in terms of all of that, I think it's all really great for SEO. So I wouldn't worry a ton about having the same title tag or description as someone else, really, because at the end of the day, I mean, in e-commerce, most of the titles are just like, if you're selling backpacks, it's like backpacks. So it's like not super creative. And then it's a little bit weird to copy someone's meta description. I wouldn't ever do that. But I mean, I don't know if Google would really care that much. Meta descriptions aren't a huge ranking factor. So I think the key thing is to avoid duplicate content, add unique content. And then when it comes to actually getting yourself ranking on Google, it becomes mainly a part of just being targeted, understanding what keyword you're trying to rank for. Usually you go for a little bit more of a long tail, and then adding that exact keyword in the URL and the title tag as the name of the product if you can, and adding that within the content as well. And then if you want to do even more solid work, you'll add in FAQs. Make sure that those FAQs are around the product, that are pre-purchase questions that are useful for people. And you may be able to add any data. So we've had success with adding in specific data like specifications. Anything that's actually useful for the user is going to move the needle. But we've also tried just kind of blasting AI content. This actually doesn't do anything negative, but you don't really get much positive results from it. So if you're just like adding a description that's, hey, this product is blah, 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 but it's pretty generic, not really adding any new information, you don't get much of a boost from that. Not really much measurable boost. So like I said, Google won't demote you for it, but they won't really increase you for it. But if you're adding useful content where you're adding some data like specifications around the product, the width, height, whatever else, or just kind of useful content in general, you can find a significant boost. And specifically around data, we've been able to increase traffic a lot by adding in a lot of data to the pages and then adding that into the schema so that Google can just very easily crawl it and extract out the information.
Yeah. And one specific example of that we were talking about a little bit before we started recording was, let's say you have a product that has a part number or SKU, and it's made by one particular manufacturer or brand. And then you have other products from other brands that are essentially drop-in replacements for that product. And this is especially relevant when you have a more technical product. It could be like a mechanical component or an engine part. We had a client recently who they sell like water filtration systems. And so you have these different filter cartridges they have to be a certain size and spec and all that. But a bunch of different brands make essentially the exact same filter, but they all have their own part number. So you were talking about, well, what you should do is basically list those other alternate part numbers on the product page. So if somebody searches for one, even if your product page is not the exact one they're searching for, your product page can still rank. Is that kind of the summary of what you were saying?
Yeah, exactly. And then we can also assume that Google does have some idea that these pieces of information are connected and that they're like useful keywords or entities that are relevant to the main search term. So there's some connection around them. So that's usually the case with specific data. So that's a perfect example where you could say, what is the brand? Like having this like kind of really like specific content rather than just like, if every filter part is the same and then you're kind of like random obscure language with AI. It's more so like, okay, brand, here's like the brand background details. Here are the alternative brands. Here are the alternative part numbers. And then having those based out in structured information. So if you think about it in HTML, it's like H2 would be the cross references, H2 specifications, H2 alternative brands, stuff like that. Or where you're actually giving very structured information that's fairly useful for the individual and definitely useful for Google. So yeah, that's exactly how to think about it. And in those kind of niches where a little bit more technical, you can get some really good SEO wins through just kind of useful data around the products.
Yeah. And in this particular example of like having different branded products that are replacements for each other, you probably on the product page, then you might want to have some messaging to help a customer who may not be super technical to know that it's okay to buy this item. So you can have like a compatibility quiz checker thing, like, is this compatible with my product that I already have? Or is this an exact replacement for this other part number? So just, rather than just listing like alternate part numbers, somebody might not know exactly what that means, but if we can communicate that to maybe the less technical user, I think that can be, helpful for conversions.
Mm-hmm. Definitely. So those are great examples. And all of that really comes into using schema, because schema or structured data is a essentially a form of code, JSON LD code. That's not too hard to read. I mean, you could look it up and you can kind of read it and you kind of get an idea. It was developed by Google in collaboration with all of the search engines. So like pretty for sure Yandex and probably Microsoft and a couple other people. If you go to schema.org, you can see, all the people that made it. And it's essentially a code that gives structured information directly to search engines. They pretty much all use it. AI crawlers are using it. And so it's very useful for this kind of information. So like you have the structured HTML content, which would be like heading tags. And then you have the structured schema or structured data JSON LD content. And that's going to be not too crazy. I mean, someone like Leighton, who's a developer, and his development team can really pretty easily go in there and add structured data, especially if you already have the data like on the page, but it might not be included in the schema. Those are great ways to get quick wins for SEO across all products if it's a bulk implementation, which we've seen some great results with, as well as AI too, because it's a little bit more obscure. I don't have the definite answer yet, but it does seem like AI engines do rely on structured data. It would make sense for them to. So I think for the most recent tests, we see AI engines using schema too. But what are
Yeah.
your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think someone listening who's not a developer or not technical might hear these terms like JSON LD and like what, like I don't know what that is, or I don't want to have to like figure that out. And you can probably talk to ChatGPT and get some sample code or whatever. But honestly, my recommendation that I make to all of our clients, and I'll shout out to Ilana Davis, who has an app in the App Store. And it's just called Ilana's JSON LD for SEO. You search for it. We'll include a link to it in the show notes. But it's just the easiest way to make sure you're doing all this correctly. It just plugs into your store and generates that code on the back end. Make sure it's all done right. And the nice thing with this schema app or the schema code is that Google and other search engines, whatever, whoever's making the standards, occasionally updates it. There's new requirements, there's new attributes that come out, and you don't really want to have to think about that on an ongoing basis and like make sure you're doing everything right. So having an app like this that just kind of handles it for you in the back end is really nice and the easiest way to do it.
Yeah. Yeah, we recommend JSON LD for SEO for most of our clients. And so it's really nice tool. Alana's great. So completely agree. It's very nice and can do some quick work for you. Awesome. Well, so we've talked a lot about the product pages. I have a lot of good stuff here. We've talked about the CRO, starting with just imagery and how you can think about to using that, and then social proof and reviews, cross sells, and unique product content, and how all of that combines for good SEO, really. So, like as long as you have the specifications, typically, I'd recommend working with somebody with SEO knowledge so that they can see that these development implementations are, technically sound for SEO. And another point that you mentioned, Leighton, was just website speed. I find a lot of merchants that I work with may overthink website speed. They may be kind of lost on it. Like, can I actually increase my speed because I'm on a Shopify site? Like, it's a big site. There's so many images. So I don't know if you've done a ton of page speed optimization, how you think about that. But I think everyone knows that page speed is important. It's important for Google. It's important for users. But I also think sometimes people can overthink it too much and they're, thinking about milliseconds and, maybe overthinking it because, for me personally, as long as the site loads at a reasonable rate, I'm typically going to, be okay with purchasing from them. But what are your thoughts
Yeah.
on page speed in your experience?
Yeah, I agree with you that there is a good balance to aim for where you're kind of following best practices. Your site isn't too bloated and you don't have these huge images that are multiple megabytes that are slowing things down or, 50 apps that are all trying to load on the same page. And there's a lot of just basic stuff, easy stuff you can do there. Like make sure your images are optimized, are appropriately sized and saved as, compressed JPEGs or whatever. And then Shopify also does their own compression of images. But yeah, we occasionally work with clients who have this idea that they want to hit these certain page speed scores, like using the Google's page speed or Core Web Vitals metrics. And those are like good metrics to look at and definitely something to be aware of and think about, but you also shouldn't be too tied to it as like this expectation that you're going to achieve perfection with your site because you're really not. And I will also say be really wary freelancers or agencies or services that promise a perfect score on all these metrics, and they'll do it very cheaply because they're essentially these like hacks you can pull where you just put in a little bit of code on the back end and it tricks the page speed testing tools into thinking that your site is much better than it is. And so it'll give you a high score and you'll look at it as the store owner and be like, great, I've hit this score. But in reality, it hasn't actually sped up the site for your users. And so it's not really positively impacting the user experience. So I would avoid or be very careful about hiring anybody to do things like that where what they're promising sounds too good to be true. And we have worked with clients where we'll do a fairly extensive optimization project for site speed, but it's a lot of work. It involves like going through the code very carefully and assessing it. And, our developers will spend many hours looking at how can we improve little things here and there to make sure that the page is loading, in as good of a way as it can. But I would say for most people, depending on where you are, like if you're in the earlier stages of launching and growing your business, just focus on the basics of don't use too many apps that are overloading and bloating the site. Make sure your images are properly optimized. Make sure your theme is using lazy loading appropriately. And then beyond that, as you grow, it might be worth hiring a developer to help with some optimization. But it's probably, like you said, it's probably not as critical of like a blocker as some people seem to think it is.
Yeah.
But like when you're talking about numbers that are big enough, if you have millions or hundreds of thousands of visitors, a little bit of page speed increase probably does have an impact on your conversion rate. So I think there's just like a good balance to aim for there.
Yeah. And we have seen it increase SEO, particularly if you fix core web vitals coming from Google Search Console. So people always show like the page speed insights tool, but Google Search Console is giving you in their core web vitals, whether it's good or bad and things like this. If you fix it so that the URLs are good, we've seen traffic increase directly from Google. And I think that's like the biggest thing. Like if you have all your URLs bad or needs improvement in there, if you're able to get it good, then that's really cool. And it can definitely improve traffic. I'm a little bit skeptical on when people get like, they already have good in the core web vitals on Google Search Console, but they're like, just kind of going really deep into page speed. I'm not sure, how much of an effect. I've never seen a super measurable effect usually after a certain point with SEO. But I'm curious about how you think about that. What do you think about the page speed insights tool? Do you think it's actually accurate? Do you have any like recommendations for different tools so that maybe we can get a better judge? And I'm curious on if you've tried anything else.
Yeah, we've looked at a few different tools over the years. I think our team currently uses one called, I think it's just called webpagetest.org, and they have a pretty nice testing tool that we use. And the cool thing about that is that it actually gives you, when you run a report, it gives you a list of suggested optimizations and specific areas in the code that you can look at. So it might say, this JavaScript file is, causing issues. You need to like look at that. And that's really helpful. And then I think they also have this feature where you can test, like, what would my page speed scores look like if I fix this issue before you even fix it? Mm-hmm. So that can be kind of a cool thing to do, just like more quickly test things out. Probably going to need to work with a developer for that. But yeah, I guess I would just say like check a few different tools and take things with a grain of salt. But I agree that focusing on the core web vitals, things like I think it's the LCP and like blocking time and stuff, like some of those are probably more important to look at.
Yeah. Yeah, that's what I found in my day. It's I found that a lot of times I've done page speed improvements and not seen an effect on SEO or conversion rate. And then when I have, it's usually because I've seen it in Google Search Console change, and you can really measurably track that. And yeah, I think you're completely right that like in reality, page speed is something that's very holistic, and correct me if I'm wrong, and very holistic to the entire code base of your website. So it's not really something where you just go in there and you like add an app and then like, boom, you have fast website. It's more like, hey, like from years of the theme being edited and just a theme that you started with and everything like that. And then the size of your images, the size of your, website and what you're doing, it's going to be a very unique scope of work. Yep. So I do think it's complicated, but it's also something that, if you do have very slow product pages or slower than your competitors might be a good benchmark because in reality, e-commerce sites don't get good page speed typically. But the thing is you're competing with other e-com stores. So if you look at your competitors ranking number one, they probably don't have 100 on page speed insights. They probably have like, third and 40, 50 or whatever.
Mhm.
And then if you're at least, if you're at like 10 and they're at 60, then, that disparity might be something to more so weigh.
Yeah.
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 So I think that's how I think about it, but I'm still not even settled on my thoughts on the best tools for all of that.
Yeah, no, that sounds right on to me. And you briefly touched there on the idea that it can kind of be like a core structural issue in your theme. And if you're on a theme that's 3, 4, 5+ years old, rather than investing a bunch of time and money in like optimizing your current theme, it might be a good opportunity, a good time to think about updating to a modern theme that's going to be a better performing theme out of the box and save you some of that work, as well as giving you access to a lot of new features that Shopify now has that weren't around a few years ago, mostly with the online store 2.0 capabilities where you can use sections and blocks and like build pages more easily and maintain them more easily. So yeah, it might be time to think about a theme
Yeah,
update.
I'm excited to talk to you more Leighton about the 2.0 on how that all works. So maybe we do a episode more on it. But I think that's all for today. Thanks so much for sharing your wisdom and insight. And yeah, it's a very important piece of a e-com store. Probably the most important from a development and SEO standpoint to get right. SEO mostly just getting the technical foundations and the content good, most of the time are not
Mhm.
really all there. I would say, yeah, probably 95% of the time I take on a client, they don't have perfect product pages for SEO. So usually you do some quick fixes with development to kind of fix that. And then it's mostly CRO. So making sure that if you're sending or planning to send, $10,000 a month, $30,000 a month of ad spend towards this page and towards these type of pages, you want to make sure that they're looking good and capturing users in the right way.
Yep, for sure. Yeah. Well, thanks, Patrick. This has been a lot of fun. And if anybody has questions or other input or disagrees with anything we said, and you want to correct us, feel free to drop a comment. But yeah, we always happy to chat more about this stuff.
Awesome. Thanks.
All right. See you next time.